Like every level of government across the United States, Chicago faces very difficult challenges over the next 4 years. A city budget truly in crisis, a school system in desperate need of reform, growing concern for public safety, and a public pension system teetering on the brink of insolvency. These are difficult challenges that will require real leadership and tough decisions from our next mayor. Good evening. My name is Brendan Reilly, and for the past 4 years, I've had the distinct pleasure of serving and representing downtown Chicago's 42nd Ward on the City Council. It's great to see such a tremendous turnout for this event tonight. This mayoral forum is further confirmation that there is unprecedented interest in the upcoming February 22nd election for mayor and city council. I'm glad there's such strong interest in this election because it will be an incredibly important one for all of us. The city of Chicago is at a crossroads. This is one of those key pivotal moments in Chicago history where voters stand at a fork in the road and have to decide which direction to take their city, down the path of preserving the status quo with short-term solutions and quick fixes, or seizing this opportunity to truly reinvent city government, literally from the ground up. That's what it takes. I would argue this will be the most important election for our mayor in decades. Like every level of government across the United States, Chicago faces very difficult challenges over the next 4 years. A city budget truly in crisis, a school system in desperate need of reform, growing concern for public safety, and a public pension system teetering on the brink of insolvency. These are difficult challenges that will require real leadership and tough decisions from our next mayor. So be sure to listen very carefully tonight. Normally, when a large crowd and podium is involved in downtown Chicago, I'm the politician who gets to sit on the hot seat. Well, not tonight. Instead, we are joined by 3 of the 4 major candidates for mayor of Chicago, and they'll get to answer the tough questions. Let's please give a big downtown welcoming round of applause for candidates Carol Moseley-Braun, Miguel Del Valle, and Gery Chico. Welcome. We're very pleased to have these candidates with us tonight. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize some of the folks up here on the risers with us today, members of the organizations represented here tonight in this incredibly packed room. I'd like to introduce Brian Hopkins, SOAR, Streeterville Organization of Active Residents. Irma Tranter, Friends of the Parks. Steve Baird, the Trust for Public Land. Margaret Frisbee, Friends of the Chicago River. Benjamin Cox, Friends of the Forest Preserves. Richard Ward, New East Side Association of Residents. Mike Novak, Chicago Recycling Coalition. Allison Pease, Fulton River District Association. Christine Williamson of Sierra Club. Jerry Edelman of Open Lands. Noah Jenkins, Friends of Downtown. Howard Lerner, Environmental Law and Policy Center. Mike Reardon of the River North Residents Association. Bob Newman of the North Dearborn Association. Joel Brandmeier, Alliance for the Great Lakes. Reverend Samuel Strawn, Developing Communities Project. And representatives from Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. I'd also like to have a big round of applause for our partners here at the Marriott, and a special thanks to Bill Ninavaji, the general manager of the Marriott. Last, but certainly not least, we are very fortunate to have one of Chicago's own legends in broadcast news here with us tonight, the one and only Andy Shaw, who we all know from his days as an award-winning political correspondent at ABC 7 Chicago. A few years ago, Andy made the decision to transition from reporting on Illinois politics to making a direct impact on reforming public policy when he took over the helm of the Better Government Association. We're thrilled he's agreed to serve as a moderator for this evening's event, and I know he'll do a fantastic job. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator for this evening's forum, Andy Shaw.
Let me say first that it's a thrill, it's an honor, and it's a privilege to be standing in front of you tonight. And as Brendan said, this packed room is a testament to the importance of this election. I also commend these three candidates. I think I'll see all three of you in Albany Park at noon tomorrow, correct? I think yes. So. Maybe not everybody's shaking their head. Tomorrow will be the fourth mayoral forum that I've either moderated or participated in. And actually, it means I will have hit the quadrifecta tomorrow because it'll be the fourth forum that Rahm Emanuel didn't attend. I'll let you make your own judgment about that. All I'm saying is I sent an email and I asked him to show up at the two forums this week, as I had previous ones. They thanked me for telling them how to run their campaign, and then told me candidly that he is making 5 appearances a day, talking to as many or more people as the other candidates, and he would be running his campaign his way. There were only so many hours in a day. I share that with you because he is missing tonight. He, of course, one of the 4 who was invited. Let me just say one word about the Better Government Association before we get into tonight's events. Ladies and gentlemen, better government is a right. It is a right. It is also a responsibility. And you know something? If I do my job well and thousands of Illinois residents join us in some fashion, it can become a reality. We can simply not tolerate public officials who treat our hard-earned tax dollars like it's their money. We can't tolerate it. And so my goal in rebuilding the BGA is very simple. We're trying to put together investigations, civic engagement, and public advocacy to change laws and ordinance and statutes so that this government of ours in the city, the county, the suburbs, the collars, and downstate, and in Springfield is run fairly, efficiently, honestly, transparently, and with integrity. That's what we're all about, and I'll just tell you that we have a few membership brochures on a table out there, but it's simple. Join us in some fashion. Call us with a tip. Check out our website. If you hear something, see something, feel something, believe something, know something, let us know and we'll check it out. That's what we do. We're bettergov.org. We have a new website. It's going to be refined even more. Lastly, I stand here alone. I can't do anything to move the ball of good government by myself. It can only be done collectively with an army of like-minded people who believe that better government is a possibility. And ladies and gentlemen, it is. It's going to be a reality, maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe in some of yours. Well, okay. I commend these three for one more reason. This is a tough format tonight. All the questions were provided to me by the 17 sponsoring groups, and I will tell you that most of them are from the green world that they live in, critical questions of a better planet through a better city. Not easy, tough ones, and I look forward to the answers because I was thankful that I wasn't on the hot seat for these because these are hard questions. But I compliment them for taking them here and taking them in all the other forums. Format is very simple tonight. We're going to give each candidate up to 5 minutes for an opening statement. They don't usually need that long, but they have that long if they want. And then we have a series of questions that will get 1-minute answers. If I need to follow up, I will. This, once again, is a forum, not a free-for-all, so we're asking the candidates not to attack one another. Doesn't mean they can't take exception to the position that one or the other may take, but let's do this civilly. We can disagree, but let's do it without being too disagreeable. So the order of the opening statements is simple. It's Carol Moseley-Braun, Miguel del Valle, and Gery Chico as decided by lottery. And then we have Herb in the front row, who's going to be our traffic cop and timekeeper. Herb will put up the yellow paper when you have 15 seconds left. He'll put up the red paper when you're out of time. We'll be a little looser tonight than many nights because these are tough questions. A minute's not always a long time, and we want to get the answers. So without any further ado, thank you all for coming, and Carol, we'll begin with you.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Oh, you can do it. You want to stand? It's up to you. Your call. Do you have a clean mic there? I'm sorry, I didn't ask you. Is it a good...
Looks pretty clean to me.
Do whatever. Do it. You can stand or you can
I'll stand. It's fine. Thank you.
At the outset, I would like to thank SOAR and Friends of the Park for giving us this opportunity to come together. And of course, your alderman, Brendan Reilly, wherever he went. Where are you? For bringing us together and giving us this opportunity to have this conversation. And Irma Tranter and, of course, Friends in the Park, with whom I go back to the early days of my involvement. Right now, my name is Carol Moseley-Braun, and I am an environmentalist. I have a small startup company that I started up actually at the beginning of the recession, not the greatest timing, but that it is a triple bottom line, fair traded, sustainable, and organic beverage company. I came to this through the long route of my involvements over time in public life, starting with when I first met Irma, fighting to save the bobolinks in Jackson Park. Jackson Park, of course, is a Frederick Law Olmsted Park, and we were trying to keep the Park District from destroying a part of it. And that was actually what kicked off my time in public law in life. And I have a consistent record as a state legislator, and then, of course, on to the United States Senate in support of environmental issues. I filed and support and passed environmental justice legislation as a United States Senator, the first brownfields legislation. As a member of the Senate Finance Committee, I was very involved in funding for environmental issues. I fought the Asian longhorn beetle infestation, if those of you will remember that, and have worked in behalf of Great Lakes water quality. With high-speed rail and transportation, the first legislation giving employers a credit for helping their employees use mass transit. I want to thank and congratulate all of you for being here tonight, and particularly with an audience this size. This is really quite extraordinary, and it really is gratifying to see so many people concerned with the environment and with environmental issues, because all of you provide the energy for sustainability and continued emphasis on the environment in our community. Whether it is water quality or air quality, energy, green building or transportation, nutrition, there are any number of aspects of these issues that touch all of our lives and affect what we do to the planet and what we do to one another going forward. And so before us, I think we have the issue that tough times, which we are all experiencing now, tough times must not be used as an excuse to neglect our commitment to the environment. I believe in a collaborative model. I believe that we have an opportunity to work with the City Council to remain focused on the panoply of issues that face us, whether it is food deserts or water quality, whether it is dealing with the issue of the infestation of the Asian carp or dealing with LEED certified and green buildings. I believe we have to work together and come together to recognize that at the end of the day, the earth is all of our mother, and the earth is something that we have to protect, and it is up to us in our generation to see that the continued degradation of our planet does not continue, that we use energy wisely, that we contribute to the well-being of all of us as one community. Really, the environmental issue is about community, how we define ourselves as a people, and whether or not we define ourselves as people who are concerned about one another and concerned about the place where we live, or whether or not we are prepared to simply exploit it to its diminishment, and to the limitation of opportunities for the next generation. At the end of the day, that is really what sustainability means, that we do nothing in our generation that will impact negatively the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And so that is my commitment. That has been my commitment for 30 years. I like to say that the best way to tell what somebody's going to do is what they've already done. I call on you, I urge you to examine my record, examine what I have done over time. I'm happy to be accountable for my record as an environmentalist for the last 30 years in public life. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, Miguel del Valle is next. I think we'll do the first round, the openings up here, and then people can stay in their seats. It'll be easier a little bit that way.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's great to be in the neighborhood. You are neighborhood residents. You are downtown neighborhood residents. And this is my third, actually, I should say, I'll correct myself, my 13th community forum. Community forums are extremely, extremely important in this campaign. There are some candidates who think that spending a couple of hours in a community forum is maybe not the most productive way to use a candidate's time, because you could use that time to go out there and shake hands at an L stop and maybe see more people, but that's not the kind of contact that Chicagoans expect. It's not the kind of contact that Chicagoans deserve, and it's not the kind of contact that's going to allow us to make full use of this historic opportunity in this election to engage residents of the city of Chicago from throughout the entire city, in every neighborhood in the city of Chicago, in a citywide conversation about the future. And tonight, I know you are going to hear the three candidates who are here give similar responses to just about every question that's asked. Because in looking at the issues, we're talking about jobs, we're talking about economic development, we're talking about the environment, we're talking about education, we're talking about balancing the budget, fiscal responsibility, we're talking about transparency, we're talking about making our government better and holding our elected officials accountable. And certainly, I think Chicago is ready to turn a corner. That is not to say that we haven't made significant progress. I think the most and the best example today of the progress that Chicago has made is right here, downtown. When I was a child, I lived on LaSalle. We lived in Lincoln Park. Then we lived in Westtown. Then we lived in Wicker Park. Then we lived in Humboldt Park. And today I live in the Belmont-Cragen area, so kept moving west. As the rent went up, we kept moving westward. And I tell my father, every time I talk to him, I said, "Pop, if you only would have bought a house in Lincoln Park, we'd be in great shape today." But he was a renter. We were renters. Couldn't afford, even though it was affordable. You know, we lived on North Park and Schiller. Nice place to buy a house, right? But we didn't. And so I'm the candidate, and I think that others can claim the same, with both feet firmly planted in the neighborhoods of Chicago. This election is about the neighborhoods of Chicago. It's about every neighborhood in the city of Chicago. And it's about every neighborhood assuming responsibility for the well-being of the entire city. And yes, it's about strengthening, continuing to strengthen the downtown area, ensuring continued growth. It's the economic engine of the city, along with our airports. But it is important for us to see that in order for us to be a world-class city, a true world-class city, we need world-class neighborhoods. And in a city where there are neighborhoods described as food deserts, we can't yet lay claim to that title. But it is a title that we will achieve. Because the same way that as a youngster I saw, and then as a professional working in communities throughout the city of Chicago, I saw neighborhoods come back and be revitalized in the surrounding areas around downtown, and neighborhoods like Wicker Park come to life with young entrepreneurs and small businesses and young residents coming and engaging fully in the community. Every neighborhood can experience the same, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes a commitment to balanced growth and balanced development, and I hope that you will join us in that effort, because I know you truly love Chicago, and that's why you're here tonight. And thank you for being here.
Miguel, you can tell Pop I made the same mistake 40 years ago, and my kids have reminded me. Gery Chico is the last opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and what a wonderful turnout. What a wonderful turnout. It's heartening for us who are on the trail day in and day out to see such a wonderful participation by the community. Thank you to SOAR for hosting this event. Thank you to all of the sponsoring organizations and participating organizations. We look forward to your questions. Thank you to Alderman Brendan Reilly, who is a wonderful leader in this community. And thank you to Andy Shaw. Andy Shaw does not have to do this, but yet he steps up. I've been at several forums, I think 2 of which Andy has moderated, and he's done a superb job. I expect nothing less tonight. I love the city of Chicago. I grew up here. I raised my children here. My wife and I live here. In fact, this will be the closest forum I've had to my home since we started the campaign. We live about 7 or 8 blocks south of here on South Michigan Avenue, my wife and I. I've been in public service for more than 20 years, serving the people of Chicago, starting as Chief of Staff for this mayor, Richard M. Daley, back in 1991. And I always believed in taking on a job for the public and giving it my all. When I was working for Mayor Daley, we didn't just sit there and watch the clock go by. We stood up, we stand up. We stood up to what the issues were of the day. At that time, we needed to revitalize our neighborhoods, and there was frankly no program on the books to do so. And we started a neighborhood revitalization program which became known as Neighborhoods Alive. And for 19 years in a row, it has been producing infrastructure and other public works to keep our neighborhoods strong, and I'm very proud of that. I also led the way to hire 1,000 police officers, and I hope we touch about this subject this evening. 1,000 police officers, and I was very, very, very proud this afternoon to receive the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. Thank you. But as we're going to talk about in the forum, police are critical to the health of a community. And I was happy to hire those 1,000. Unfortunately, over the last 12, 13 years, the manpower levels in the police department have decreased tremendously. And today we're woefully understaffed, probably by my count, as much as 2,000 police officers. So I've proposed the addition of 2,000 police officers to our city budget, and it can be done just the way we did the 1,000 before. I also had the ability to start the community policing program with a group of people in the mayor's office, and it revolutionized policing. It went from a reactive model where you called 911 to one now where we had participation and dialogue between the police and the community, and I think it made our city a whole lot better. Then, in 1995, I was asked to take the role of chairmanship of the Chicago Public Schools. The schools at that time were in crisis. In fact, the U.S. Secretary of Education called them the worst in the nation. I stepped up with a number of people, and we turned that around. 2 years later, President Bill Clinton held up Chicago as an urban reform model. By the time I left the Chicago Public Schools, when I walked in, it was $1.3 billion in the red. By the time I left 6 years later, it was $350 million in surplus in the bank. Test scores rose for 6 years. We had the nation's largest school construction program, building 65 new schools, renovating 400 more. And we had labor peace with our teachers, which is an important thing to achieve. After that, I went to the Chicago Park District. It was a wonderful assignment. I had the greatest appreciation for the environmental issues that affect our city from my position at the Chicago Park District. There, I was telling Jerry Edelman before we started, one of the mantras that I kept on my desk was add green space, add green space, add green space. And I'm pleased to tell you, Jerry, that in my 3 short years at the Park District, we added about 400 acres of green space to the Chicago Park District holdings. Beyond that, we took the opportunity to bring recycling into our parks unlike it had ever been before. We stopped using gas-powered mowers and went to environmental-friendly mowers. We started to use the capture of rainwater to help water some of our lawns. And we began to use a LEED certification for the construction of our buildings, the likes of which we had never seen before. We were incredibly sensitive to the environment, and a park district should be a leader in that effort. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I was asked by Mayor Daley to oversee the restructuring of our community college system, and it was not doing well. Out of every 100 persons that started out pursuing an associate's degree, only 7 achieved one. Those statistics are woefully low. Same thing on job training. There, we had one of our objects to train people for jobs. We had no job placement statistics. When Mayor Daley announced he was not going to run, I stepped up to run for Mayor of Chicago because, as I said, I love this city. I have a lot of experience to bring to this situation, and I look forward to taking our city in a new trajectory to achieve new heights. Thank you very much for having us.
Okay, now we'll get to the Q&A, and I'll tell you in advance that all of these questions were provided by the sponsoring groups, which took a tremendous amount of time and energy to prepare very diligent, thoughtful, and comprehensive questions. So I'm going to pretty much follow the script tonight. If time permits, I'll interject a couple of my own down the road, but there's a lot of important issues that these groups want to hear from the candidates on, so I'm going to stay on the reservation to the largest extent I'm humanly capable of. First one is just a baseline question. It's about the Fisk and Crawford coal-powered plants. And the question simply is that these two plants have failed to meet environmental standards over the years. They haven't been retrofitted. So the question from the groups that notice that they represent a pollutant factor and an unsafe environmental factor would be, what steps would you take as mayor to enforce the Chicago Clean Power Ordinance by requiring the cleanup of all pollutants or the shutting down of those two plants by 2015? And Carol, we'll begin with you on that one.
Well, there's no question but that the Fisk and Crawford plants, which have been grandfathered, should not be allowed to avail themselves of that grandfathering, that exemption, any further. The incidence of asthma and other respiratory issues, the level of air quality here in the city is sufficiently challenged that Fisk and Crawford represent a threat to the public health and safety, and I believe they should be shut down.
Okay. Miguel, same question.
I held a press conference just a few weeks ago in front of the Fisk plant asking for the city council to immediately consider the Clean Power Ordinance and to vote up or down on that ordinance. And I called on them to approve the ordinance, of course, and for us to get on track with either forcing them to retrofit or to clean the plants or to close these plants within the time frame allowed. I sponsored health fairs as a state senator for 20 years, and one of the things we did during that health fair was screenings and information to families with kids with serious health problems, asthma problems. We need to clean up our air in the city of Chicago, and those plants, either they clean up or we close them down, and it must happen.
Gery, last answer to the first question.
Yes. I very much support the Clean Power Ordinance. I would set a definitive timetable for the company, Midwest Generation, to either achieve the environmental standard for health or we close them down. Short of that, what we do, even if we pass the ordinance and that won't work, we lock arms with the U.S. EPA and bring further pressure on that company to clean up its act, or if that doesn't work, then we file a lawsuit. I'll tell you why. It's very simple. It's very simple. People are being harmed. People are being harmed as we sit here by the production of that energy. And with the emissions coming from those plants are harmful, and the time for rhetoric is over. We need to take action.
Okay. Shifting briefly from environmental health to economic health. This question will begin with Miguel in the center, is about the downtown business area. What kind of physical changes or projects do you see as essential to downtown's continued evolution as a premier business, tourism, and residential destination? And what do you think is the business community's role in the development of downtown? And how do you convince a skeptical business community to stay engaged at a time when things have been so difficult here in Chicago?
Well, I don't think it takes much to convince the business community to stay engaged. It's in their best interest, of course. And I think everybody recognizes that the downtown area has been revitalized. If you think of where we were 20 years ago and 25 years ago, everyone sees the difference. Tourists love coming here. they complement our city for being clean, and so it is very important to maintain the downtown area very, very clean. I'd like to see food vendors. I'd like to see working in conjunction with the restaurants, of course. I'd like to see other kinds of activities that will ensure that people feel safe at all times downtown. And then, of course, we need to continue to promote and expand the activities along our lakefront in order to attract more people into the downtown area. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we continue to build our theater district and that we continue to build all the amenities that attract people into the downtown area so that we can then keep the businesses going strong.
How do you strike a balance between business development and residential needs?
Well, the residential development around downtown has been like a shot in the arm to downtown. Downtown is now a family place. And young families are coming in and raising their families. The real challenge is, how do we make sure that there are adequate schools, educational programs available for those families, and to make sure that people have a lot of options available. And so the residential development around the downtown area and making sure that people have the ability to deal with conflicts and problems as they arise when they're dealing with condo associations and other kinds of things, and conversions of buildings from rental to condos. These are the kinds of things that the city needs to make sure that there are policies in place that make sure that people are properly serviced.
Okay. Gery Chico, your plan for downtown as we move forward?
Well, you asked about the engagement of the business community. I think one of the ways that you do that is to structure the government to obtain the engagement of the business community. I've called for a jobs cabinet to be created in the mayor's office so that we have business sitting side by side with the mayor on a regular basis, helping determine the policy that will make sure that we have job growth not only in the central area but throughout the entire city. So we want them at the table in a structural sense. Beyond that, one of the most fascinating developments in our city over the last quarter century has been the immersion of downtown as the newest, largest community in our city. I can tell you 20 years ago when I'd walk home from work, you'd see tumbleweeds blowing downtown. It's not that way anymore. Now in the summer, you'll be run over by the flip-flop crowd. We have a lot of young people who are living downtown. As I said, my wife and I live downtown. It's a wonderful development. We need to continue to nurture our cultural institutions, Navy Pier under new leadership, the Grant Park Music Festival. I helped keep that when I was at the Chicago Park District, a free, open classical music festival. We need to continue the vibrance that those festivals and other activities bring to our area.
A very quick follow-up. This business cabinet, is it going to cost us a lot more money?
Zero. It's free. These are volunteers. Just the way we've done, I mean, I've worked many, many years with business people in every position I've held in government to bring them into helping us, whether it's building things or programming. If you look at Millennium Park, there isn't a feature on that park that doesn't have one of the great corporations of this city signed on to build it.
Thank you very much. Carol, your downtown plan or philosophy or combination of the two?
Chicago is a world-class city because of the visionary Burnham plan that saved our lakefront and that opened it up and gave us the beauty that we all enjoy as Chicagoans. So that's the first thing. I think preserving and making certain that we preserve the lakefront as free and clear and open to the people for time and going forward. I think that's an important first step. The second has to do with when you talk about the engagement of the business community has actually always been a driving force for preservation and for environmental protection in the city. Because Burnham himself, all of the people who came together that created the cultural institutions along the lakefront, these were all business people, but they had the vision to see how important it was for the city. I'm talking too slow, I guess. Second, with regard to continuing the residential development, making sure we have better public transportation so people can get from one part of the downtown to the other, making sure public safety is a priority so
Take
that
a few
it's
more
a safe
seconds,
place.
because I asked them follow-ups.
Thank you very much. I was trying to talk really fast. Okay, so public safety is essential. That's the first step. To give the support for business development, for the development of and the attraction of shops and the like in the loop. and in downtown, to make certain that we have the kind of the linkages that will allow people to enjoy the downtown area as a residential area, which includes having elementary schools that are available, to having places where people can shop, and so that the residential needs or the needs of residents are met as well as the needs of tourists.
Okay, we go back to the environment, and this is one having to do with energy efficiency. Gery, you take the first crack at this one. Energy efficiency, these groups tell me, and there's been no disputing this, is the wisest and the cheapest and the fastest way to reduce pollution and meet energy needs. And so the question is, would you support investment in auditing and retrofitting all city-owned and city-leased buildings over the next 4 years, and what other things might you do to improve energy efficiency around the city?
It's an excellent question. Andy, I already have. In the last 3 positions I've held, there hasn't been a building project undertaken that hasn't met a certain LEED certification standard. That's just a wise way to go. Not only is it environmentally sensitive, it's cost efficient. I mean, when you look at windows in a building that we've had to renovate, that saves money. And I'll tell you one personal story. When I was at the Chicago Public Schools and we switched the windows on 400 buildings, the children were warmer in the winter. I would be on the Kennedy Expressway at the Brentano School. It was so cold from those old windows, the drafts were affecting the kids and their ability to study. So there obviously are environmental reasons to do these things, but there are also very practical reasons to do these things to give children a better environment to study and learn in.
Let me follow up with a question that would have been asked afterwards, but it makes more sense to follow up with each one of you, and that has to do with one of the more troubled environmental programs in my lifetime, recycling, which never seems to have gotten its act together for reasons that these people up here understand much better than me. As mayor, what do you do to implement an effective cost and energy-wise recycling program and get rid of all this solid waste that we seem not to be able to get a handle on in this city?
Let's do it. Today, 1/3 of the city is recycling. 1/3. 2/3 are not. I've proposed a plan to bring recycling to the entire city at no cost to the residents. How? We're going to change the way we pick up garbage in this city. Right now, we pick up on antiquated ward boundary lines, which is ridiculous. That's a relic from the past. We need to go to a larger grid system that allows for less trucks, less hours spent doing it. And by our calculation, we figure, Andy, in the first year we could save $30 million. After that, we're going to save more money by the following. For every ton you don't put in the landfill because you aren't recycling, when you start to recycle, you reduce the tonnage going to the landfill. You don't have to pay for that any longer, and you can now sell your commodity recyclables, on the commodities market and make money. So not only do you save money by the way we pick up garbage, that'll pay for free recycling to the rest of the city, but we'll make money by spending less on landfills and making more by selling our recyclables. It's a wonderful solution. It ought to be done quickly.
So Carol, there's 2 parts, and you feel free to answer them in either order. One is the question of how you get a vibrant recycling program going, which Gery just talked about. And secondly, what do you do for more energy efficiency vis-a-vis retrofitting over the next few years? Either one, or mix them together, whatever you like.
Thank you. Well, obviously, making certain that the new buildings are more energy efficient is a priority, and there's a whole LEED certification process for that. But I think the real issue for us is what to do with regard to retrofitting of existing buildings. And there, particularly condominia, many of them have been exempted from some of the rules regarding not just energy efficiency, but also safety requirements. And I think that we need to take a look at that, work collaboratively where we can with building owners to see to it that those condominium are brought up to not just life safety standards, but also energy efficiency, because that's in everybody's interest. That's the first thing in terms of energy efficiency. The green buildings, it's a good way, frankly, to save money over the long haul, because quite frankly we spend more money trying to catch up with our neglect in this area than acting proactively to address these issues on the front end. The second thing, in terms of recycling, I mean, we've never had a recycling program that made any sense, for one thing, because of the way that it has not been coordinated with garbage pickup. And so the whole issue of refuse management is one that ought to be addressed in a cogent way, with recycling as a priority, made part of the garbage collection process. The grid system is something to be considered, but at the same time, to make certain the communities have the garbage pickup that's needed and appropriate for that community. Having a clean city is important to everybody. It's important for health and safety, but it's also important for the environment and the way that the city appears. And if people have an environment that is suitable for a quality standard of living, it will energize the communities as a whole, and not only make it a more pleasant place to live, but keep our city one of the most livable in the world. Thank you.
Switching gears now to another thorny challenge for any mayor, and I remember, I apologize, Miguel.
I got you. Don't worry, I got you.
No, please excuse me. I know we have a stage full of people who would help me get it right.
Well,
you get it in either order, too.
Well, thank you, Andy. The wonderful thing about campaigns is that we hear wonderful proposals. And somehow the proposals that we hear are so wonderful, we have to wonder, well, why didn't we do it before? Why did we wait for the campaign? These are tough issues. I was criticized by some folks when I indicated that we may have to look at a small fee in order to do recycling citywide. Some folks said to me, I don't mind paying a small fee if we're really going to do recycling citywide. The fact of the matter is that we can switch to a grid system, and we're going to do that, I think, regardless, because we have a $650 million plus deficit in the city of Chicago. And so how do you do these wonderful things like citywide recycling when you're facing a $650 million deficit? You know, we need to prioritize, of course, and to me, recycling is a priority, and we need to make sure that when we enter into what will probably be a private-public partnership for recycling, because I don't think the city can do it alone, we're going to have to make sure that the agreement that we enter is not another meter deal type of agreement, one that is carefully looked at and one that will ensure that we are going to capture the growing value of the recyclable materials so that we can keep the cost of recycling to the residents as low as possible. And that's the reality that we're faced with. I am not going to do pie in the sky here and tell you that we're going to do 100% recycling in the city of Chicago and it's not going to cost you one additional cent. It's not going to happen. But we should move towards ensuring 100% recycling in the city of Chicago.
And the retrofitting issue, Miguel, the energy efficiency?
With the retrofitting, energy efficiency, no doubt about it, public buildings, but we have to start thinking beyond the public buildings. We have to start thinking about financing. Obviously, the dollars are returned. And so how do we finance that? How do we get the financial institutions to cooperate with us so that we can start doing the retrofitting of as many homes and schools in the neighborhoods as possible?
Thank you. This next question brings back fond memories because it relates to probably 100 stories I did over the years. Once or twice a year, the mayor does what we used to call a dog and pony show, but in reality it's just a legislative outing to Springfield with an action agenda aimed at getting the lawmakers down there to do things for the benefit of the city of Chicago. And shock to the system, as powerful as the Chicago mayor is always thought to be, frequently he or she came back virtually empty-handed from those trips. So let me ask you, when you head down there for the first time, I guess that might be in May of this year as the newly elected mayor, what 3 priorities do you bring to the meetings with Mr. Madigan, Mr. Cullerton, Ms. Radonio, and Mr. Cross? And we'll begin with Carol this round.
Thank you. I still have floor privileges in the Illinois House. So
You remember those trips?
I do. I was Mayor Harold Washington's floor leader in Springfield, and I know how the process works down there. And there's no reason why the mayor of Chicago should come back empty-handed. My top priorities, to specifically answer your question. First off, the transportation and the school funding formulas need to be addressed. That is one of the reasons that Chicago gets shortchanged so much, both with regard to our school funds as well as transportation. You know, someone made the point that in downstate Illinois, the children wave and the school bus stops for them. Here in Chicago, the kids have to go find a spot on the CTA. So we have to address those funding formula. The second is to get the 10%. We just had a tax increase in the state of Illinois. And the city of Chicago, for some reason, lost the 10% local share on the increment. Well, that cost us $280 million. And so I would go down and make it a point to press on getting that part out of the incremental addition to the state income tax. Finally, I think that in addition, you said 3, so I'm trying to get there, the anti-Chicago policy of the state not paying for teacher pensions. Well, obviously, the issue of pensions is something that we have to look at seriously. In the United States Senate, I did a deep dive on the whole pension issues, particularly because it pertains to women a lot. And so to make sure that we get pension fairness and pension equity out of Springfield is another priority for me as mayor.
And let me do the same thing in combining two because they fit so nicely together. You mentioned transportation. What are your transportation priorities for downtown, and how can Chicago leverage federal infrastructure dollars to enhance the use of public transportation to lessen the reliance on polluting cars?
To me?
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
okay.
We'll
Well, one, we have to do something about bus service. Let's start with that. I mean, we've seen a great cut in the bus service, and the result is that overcrowding, overuse, they're not as clean as they should or could be, and people have to wait long times to get them. So making sure the bus rapid transit routes are appropriate. And I would point out also with regard to bus service, that's not as environmentally sensitive as trains, but the fact is that it provides mass transportation is always a better alternative when you can use it to people having to drive cars. So that's one thing, to focus in on and improve mass transportation. To launch more bus service on the University of Chicago model where the institution pays for the bus, but anybody can ride it. That's another issue. To make certain that we have aggressive pedestrian zones and bike lanes to improve the quality of life and to give people access without having to worry about aggressive traffic. And then in terms of leveraging federal infrastructure spending, let me quickly point out, because I've got the red thingy, again, I have floor privileges in the United States Senate, and I worked on transportation funding. I know that we are being shortchanged in more ways than I can detail since I have no more time. I would very much like to go and make certain that with the next reauthorization of the transportation funding bill that we get our fair share here in Chicago.
Miguel, I believe you still have floor privileges in Springfield, if not Washington. So what 3 priorities do you take down to present to legislative leaders if you're elected mayor? What top 3 for Chicago do you bring to Springfield?
Well, before I indicate priorities, you indicated that the mayor makes a trip to Springfield in May?
Well, I'm just saying that would be the earliest that a mayor probably could.
Well, no, but the mayor shouldn't just go down to Springfield just one day in a year. I think that's been part of the problem. I was in Springfield, just like Carol, for 20 years, and we'd get the alderman once a year to get on a bus downtown and go down to Springfield and be there 2 hours, and they'd go from legislator to legislator, and the legislators would think, wow, okay, nice for you to stop by, but where have you been? I haven't heard from you all year. Communication is important. And I think that it's important for the mayor to be connected. Mayor Daley is a wonderful person. He's a wonderful person. He loves the city. He's worked very, very hard. He's passionate. We are indebted to him for an awful lot. But Mayor Daley didn't have that much communication with Springfield. And I think this time around, if there had been more communication with Springfield, and with the governor, I think that we would have had a different arrangement than what we ended up with the share of the local government distributor fund that needs to increase. But in terms of issues, priorities, I agree with Mayor Daley. I am going to continue to deal with gun control issues in Springfield. And I know that the Supreme Court has spoken, but I look to the day when there's a change in the makeup of the Supreme Court. I'm going to deal with pensions and getting the teachers their fair share of pension dollars from Springfield. We're going to change the transportation formula because it favors downstate now. And, of course, I've run out of time.
Well, you've run out of time for that one, but keep talking about transportation, because the other piece of that question is there's an awful lot of federal transportation that comes out of that so-called ICE-T bill that is, what, every 4 years. What do you do to 6 years? How do you get, what's your Washington transportation agenda as it relates to downtown?
Again, it's the same formula. You have to be aggressive. You have to have a presence in D.C., and you have to fight for what is estimated will be a $385 billion available in federal funding over the next 30 years. And so Chicago has to be aggressive both in D.C. As well as in Springfield, and we've got to be aggressive with Metro, with the Pasteboard, with the RTA, and everywhere we can to capture and maximize the capture of federal funds. We are leaving some dollars on the table because we are not paying enough attention at times.
We switch now to a subject that's near and dear to many of the groups here. Oh, did I miss Gery again? Okay, well, at least if I miss each person one time, nobody will accuse me of favoritism. So I'll miss you next, Carol. I'm sorry, Gery.
Can I answer?
Either order, either Washington or Springfield first. You heard the questions and the answers.
Sure. Thank you.
And this is 2 minutes. So
whether the venue is Washington or Springfield, it has to be a behavior that's all year long. You don't just wake up and do this one annual trip. I will say that the city does have offices that advocate on its behalf in both places. We have a Washington office that advocates, and we have Springfield people that advocate as well. But it is true, we have to stay at it day in and day out and communicate frequently about our agenda. And I'll tell you, if we can't get funds with President Obama, Bill Daley, Ray LaHood, and Dick Durbin, we are asleep at the switch. So that's number one. But we do have to be aggressive about it. My agenda, year-long in Springfield, especially some of the topics are timely given what just happened with the raising of the income tax, which, by the way, I think was a shocker to everybody because nobody heard about those size increases. Number one, jobs are critical. I go all over this city and people talk about the need for a job, or they're worried about holding on to the job they have. We have to have tax credits in certain areas of the city that have been particularly hard hit to offset the increase in the income tax, which is going to be additional bricks on the back of any mayor trying to lure companies in certain parts of the city. Two, property tax relief. The property tax relief is non-existent in this income tax increase. It has to be there. That has been a standing feature of the income tax legislation forever. It's gone here. I would have that in my agenda. With regard to education, for 15 years, the Board of Education has been promised that its teacher pension fund in Chicago would receive 20% of the amount of money that the state spends on all other pension funds around the state. We get about 2%. We've been shortchanged for that many years. There's hundreds of millions of dollars due and owing to Chicago. And then finally, we need a crime agenda to deal with reasonable gun regulation. We need to have community policing assistance. And we need to make sure that we have gang legislation constantly on that front to make our communities safe. And Andy, I think you said I could talk about transportation a minute?
Well, I'm sorry, Herb, how long did he have here?
I had 2 minutes. Okay. Fair enough.
We'll get back to it another time because there's another transportation question. But let's switch to parks because actually the parks, this is a statistic I'm sure I heard over the years but haven't heard recently, and it's always surprising. It's 55 of Chicago's 77 communities do not have a minimum of 2 acres of parks per 1,000 people compared to a national standard of 10 acres for every 1,000 residents. So I guess the question for this group from many of the people up on the stage, how do you commit to adding neighborhood public park space to the communities that have less than the 2 acres, and how do you do it? How do you simply do it? And we start with Miguel on that one.
Well, I have a history of doing that, as other candidates do as well. I've worked with Irma Tranter over the years to develop parks in the neighborhoods, passive parks, larger parks, play lots. We did it with state funding. We did it with member initiative money. And folks, we have lots of vacant lots out there in many parts of the city. And I was just saying today that due to the foreclosure crisis in the neighborhoods, I was just yesterday on a block just off of Jackson and Cicero where there are 12 vacant homes. And some of those homes, I'm sorry to say, will end up being demolished and creating vacant lots. As we talk about urban agriculture and as we talk about park space, we're going to have to put the development of parks on a fast track in order to keep many of our communities from becoming eyesores that are going to result from this foreclosure crisis that we have, because banks are walking away from properties and they're deteriorating very quickly, and it is a major, major problem in the city of Chicago today. And so as we talk about parks, I'm sorry to say that there will be land available for that, and I'd rather see a park than vacant lots.
Let me follow up with a yes-no question because it's in the same vein, and I'm a little bit out of order, but I think it's appropriate to do this. In terms of the Lakefront plan, do you commit to completing the South Lakefront Park system from 71st Street to the Indiana border by 2015?
Absolutely. I've been down on 63rd Street, and the question is funding, of course. Where are the capital dollars going to come from? Again, I go back to our fiscal situation right now. It may be that some of these projects won't begin to unfold for a few years until we get by this fiscal crisis. I am not, as a candidate, going to promise the world. It would be irresponsible for me to do that. But these are goals that we should have on our lists, and they're very, very important, and our lakefront needs to be developed. I've been on 63rd Beach. You know, past 63rd, we can do a whole lot more. There are things that can be done to extend the lakefront, so we want to do that.
And one more yes or no. Keep the Children's Museum at Navy Pier or continue with the plan for Grant Park?
I agree with the alderman. We should build that Children's Museum in a location, and I just finished talking about all the empty lots that are available. There are lots of places in the city of Chicago that are very accessible for school buses and public transportation, and that are in need of economic development. This could stimulate development in a city, in an area close to the downtown area. And so we need a location that makes sense. And there's tremendous support. I fully support a children's museum. I want it to be as large as possible. My grandkids have gone to the Children's Museum. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. We wanted to see it in Chicago. We want it to become a reality. But I think that the neighbors should have a say. And I think that in this case, the neighbors have spoken, and I think they've spoken wisely, in my opinion.
Okay. Gery, let me do the same quickie. Children's Museum, Navy Pier, Grant Park, or as Miguel said, maybe someplace else?
Keep it at Navy Pier.
Okay. Finish the lakefront project all the way to the south side.
Yes, absolutely finish the lakefront park system. That's one of the unique features of Chicago, known around the world. Publicly owned land straddling the water from one border of the city to the other. You asked earlier about the under green-spaced areas of the city. We've made some improvement in this area. We're not done. This is something that's a constant. You don't stop and say, great, we're finished one day. But I can tell you from my time as chairman of the Chicago Park District, we completed a number of parks that previously weren't there. I'll just give you a few. Sangamon Adams, the Erie Street Park. DeSable Park needs to be complete. Absolutely. Little Village has one of the worst problems in the city, And I was happy to start the land acquisition process. It wasn't as easy as you want because a lot of the land around there is tied up and people aren't anxious to give it. The old Celotex property at 31st and Kedzie. But as I said earlier, we added over 400 acres of green space to the park system. We need to do a better job of making sure that our coverage is equal in the neighborhoods especially that need it. But let's not forget about our lakefront. I would like to see a plan that expands the lakefront park system that we have, because so many people go to the lakefront every day of the summer. Even now, people are going there. We have to make sure that that is truly accessible, and we don't need to be shoehorning people in places when we can actually build out our beaches a little bit more.
Well, this is a good time to forget you, Carol, but I'm not going to because I've already been admonished twice.
See, I wasn't a staffer for Mayor Daley. Now, come on.
All right, so it's a three-parter in whatever order. I'll make it simple. Expand the lakefront park system all the way to the south boundary.
I'd want to study that. There are difficulties. The La Vita Children's Hospital is there, and I don't know that we want to move that out of the way. There's private property that's going to require a lot of money to acquire. Certainly Rainbow Beach and the other beaches, the other parks that are already public should be. Chicago should be acquired to finish out the lakefront plan. You know, our city motto is Urbs in Horto, which is Latin for city in a park. And city in a garden, I'm sorry. And I believe that it is important that we continue that philosophy, both in the development of urban gardens as well as urban parks in the neighborhoods. And that focus on neighborhood development, I think, is a priority for me, certainly. Urban gardening holds great potential to educate, to clean up, to inspire community development. Urban parks hold great potential for beautifying our city. And as Miguel del Valle points out, given the unfortunate circumstance we have with all the vacant lots that will result from all the abandoned buildings and homes, I think we really need to engage in a collaboration with the aldermen and collaboration with the not-for-profits around town to make certain that those spaces are appropriately and properly used.
And that's how you expand the park acreage in communities.
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
and so the third part of that question is the Children's Museum, Navy Pier, Grant Park, or a site to be named later?
I think the Children's Museum should stay where it is and be developed there. I don't believe that we should further have incursions in Grant Park.
And help me with one thing. You said the city motto was Urbs in Orto. Now, Mike Royko always said it was, where's mine? I mean, who's right here?
Ubi es mea.
Okay. All right.
That was what he said.
Now, and you mentioned the problem of foreclosures and all those, the abandonments, and that feeds right into the next question, which is that this remarkably vibrant condominium development downtown, Gold Coast, along the lakefront in both directions has been horrendously hit by the real estate market, and now we have a lot of space and a lot of renters sort of jammed up with their situations. What do you support the ordinances that have been passed recently that give the renters a little more protection from avaricious owners who are trying to regain too many dollars in their condo buildings too quickly?
Yes.
And
yes. And renters should have notice. I mean, I've known of people who've had situations where there was a foreclosure on the condominium that they rented, and they found themselves set out basically without even knowing that the action had been going on. So I think communication, these ordinances, I believe Alderman Reilly has been involved with some of them. I think they're very important to protect people in their homes.
And two more quick parts of that question.
And due process.
Your opinion about plans for condominium hotels and vacation rentals in residential buildings. I guess more creative or more, I guess you'd call that more liberal use of the space in a building, even when some residents are a little bit unhappy with the transient nature of those transactions.
Again, I think that's something that you work in collaboration with the local elected officials, the aldermen particularly, to develop something that's appropriate for that community. The people I know who own condominium have been very resistant to have that kind of transit in the buildings that they own. And so I don't think that it should be forced on anybody. I think, if anything, that where it is appropriate, where the tenants agree and the owners agree then that's what the condominium boards can sort out.
And the third part of that question, what do you do with some of the stalled downtown projects, for instance, the Chicago Spire, DuSable Park, the hotel frame at Clark and Wacker, dead in the water for the moment because of financing problems?
Well, you know, one of the things that we have a lot of our pension fund monies are currently being invested in venture capital funds and other funds that invest in turn on the coast. So there's a gap of about 30% in terms of what we put in and what actually gets invested here in Chicago. And what I would like to see is a little more attention to the pension fund management to make certain that not only we get a better return on our investment, that's another conversation, but also to make sure that the investments happen here at home more frequently than they are right now.
Miguel, let me start with the broader question of renter protection in this particular marketplace. Do you go along with what's been done thus far? Does more need to be done in terms of protecting renters who are maybe feeling pressure from the owners of buildings who themselves are having financing problems?
Well, there was an ordinance filed, but it hasn't been acted on to
You
protect
support that?
renters and to give them more time instead of 4 months, 9 months, and to provide for a relocation expense up to $1,500, but there hasn't been action. I just filed a resolution to require all city departments that have a role in dealing with the problems of condo associations to report on how they're addressing those issues, because there's fragmentation in the city, and I've been told that people are lost many times. They mean well, and they're trying to deal with their problems within their associations, but they need direction, they need help at times. And so the city is not very good at providing that kind of assistance, but it allows me to make the point about how things will change under my administration. When we have a city council that doesn't deliberate, and you have a wonderful alderman, and I'm not saying that because he's unopposed. I support him. He's unopposed. I support him, but I see the frustration in the faces of many of the aldermen, because as city clerk, I sit there at every council meeting, and they want their ordinances heard. We need to have a deliberative process in the city council, and I, as mayor, am going to liberate aldermen.
Okay, and so
I'm declaring that here tonight. I'm going to liberate them to allow them to represent their constituency and ensure public hearings on these kinds of issues, including the ordinances that are pending, and allow for you to come in and provide testimony, and let's hear proponents and opponents, and let's work towards consensus so that we could get things done, because here we're talking about an issue that should have been addressed months ago, many months ago.
do we see a bumper sticker coming, free the Chicago 50?
Hopefully this election will be decided April 5th, and at that time you'll see the bumper stickers.
Give us a quick answer, Miguel, to the two other pieces here. What do you do to jumpstart some of these stalled projects? And secondly, do you support some of the more liberal use of space in buildings to help people meet their expenses, such as shorter-term vacation rentals, more transient rentals?
Well, there are folks in this room who will have a difficult time with that type of thing, with a transient type of situation. I really think that it needs to be studied, and I think we need to come up with a common sense ordinance that allows for us to get through these difficult times. And it means that we're going to maybe do things that may have to change in a couple of years. As occupancy rates increase downtown, there may be some changes. So I could see some temporary arrangements that are agreed to, but I really won't do that unless there is consensus. And I really think that it's time to listen to people in the neighborhoods, and to listen to homeowners, and to listen to tenants. Okay. We don't do enough of that in the city of Chicago and city government. The days of the fifth floor dictating every action that takes place in the city council are coming to an end.
Okay. Gery, I guess it's 3 in 1. Jump-starting stalled development.
Well, there's no doubt about it. We are in one of the awful crises that, in finance that we've ever seen in our country. I don't know how much, as a realistic matter, we can do to jumpstart a building that has the problems such as the Spire or this building on Wacker Drive. I know that some of the owners are trying to work out right now a disposition of their property to another buyer, which would be fine. We'd like to see that happen. I think the city has a role to enable that where it can, where it's responsible public policy, that the subsequent buyer is going to do something that's acceptable to the community. Either accept the zoning that's in place right now, or if there's going to be a change, then yes, let's have community input as to what the appropriate project would be. But one of the things I think a mayor can do, especially for smaller scale projects, is call the banks in and ask the banks around the table, let's talk about lending in our city. Let's talk about foreclosure activity in our city. And let's see what we can do to get reasonable here and allow people to modify. I mean, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal not long ago, 2 banks in Chicago, 2 projects, one operated with reasonableness, and the other one used every tactic in the court to cram down on that developer. The mayor can use the bully pulpit to try to make this a more rational situation so that we can work through these problems and try to bring these projects back on the tax rolls to generate tax revenue.
And if you can quickly hit the other 2, more liberal use of allow people in condos more liberal use of their apartments for short-term transition?
I think you have to draw a reasonable balance here. I mean, my wife and I, my wife Sonny and I, we live in one of those buildings, and we live full-time in those buildings. And so I think you have to be careful as to what you allow to take, and that's why we have condo associations and boards to make those decisions in many cases. With regard to your question about the vacation and hotel rental issue, there's an ordinance in the city council now that's on the books that limits the number of units in a building that can be used as hotels or vacation rentals to 6 units. That's what Brendan Reilly led the charge on. I thought he was very rational. And we should observe the legislation that's on the books. But I'll tell you, it's a real problem. And I appreciate it. It's a sensitive issue because some people want to move, and they can't move. They can't sell their unit, so they need to rent it out for some short-term income. So I think we have to be reasonable, understand that we are in a period of crisis, and kind of follow the market as this goes.
And yes or no on supporting the renter protection measures that are sitting in council?
Absolutely. Fortunately, the market giveth and taketh away. Right now, there aren't that many people converting buildings to condominiums because they can't find the financing. In fact, if there's anything going forward right now in the city, it's more likely to be a rental product because we don't have enough supply and more people want to rent because of the insecurity they have with the market. So I think that we're in fairly good shape there, but I, of course, support the measure of giving notice to someone before they're summarily dismissed from their home.
Okay, from development in buildings to the critical issue of water and something that's called sewage effluent disinfection, which in simple terms is this fight between the EPA and the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District over whether the discharge from their plants needs to be even more carefully scrubbed so that what's going into the river is virtually pristine as opposed to still polluted to some extent. The district has been opposed to that, claiming it's far too expensive, up to $1 billion. Environmental groups think that that's a ridiculous estimate and that we do need to have them do that because we deserve a clean river. It's an environmental concern. Did I frame that right? Okay. For a layman, at least give me a hand for that one. So Gery, we start with you. Do you fight the Water Reclamation District on this one on behalf of city residents, or do you support their position, which is it's not necessary, their discharges are already clean enough?
I support city residents. We should strive for the highest possible level of cleanliness in our waterways. And it's not just for these certain effluents. We have to constantly be vigilant about new carcinogens that may appear in our water. Just like you saw in the last week, the Tribune did an excellent job in highlighting a new carcinogen that's in our water. And we have to take prompt action about this. You know, I'm a little worried about the state of affairs at the Jardine Water Plant. I mean, I've been watching this for a while. At the time it was built, it was one of the engineering marvels of the world, right there with the Hoover Dam, the largest freshwater filtration plant in the world. But we have lost a little bit in terms of capital investment to keep it up to speed, in terms of the monitoring mechanisms that measure the quality of the water, some of the computer systems that operate it. And we have to be careful because we take these things for granted, especially the infrastructure below ground. but I can assure you when you turn that faucet and it doesn't work, you think about it. So what I would like to see is an entire audit of the Chicago water system to make sure that we are striving for the highest standards possible in terms of cleanliness and operation.
Gery, let's do water part 2 here, since we have another question relating to that, and that is that installing water meters in Chicago's single-family homes and 2-flats is one way to save 30 million gallons of fresh water a day, yet Chicago's Meter Safe program is merely voluntary. Is water conservation on your environmental agenda, and will you change that program from voluntary to mandatory with a goal of reaching 50% of single-family homes and 2-flats during your first term?
Water meters should be installed on every user's home or business. Nobody should be paying for the water of another. This will also force a conservation of a precious resource. If you ever want to know how important water is, go out west and see the fights that they have about the draw from the Colorado River, the neighboring states, and the battles that they have over this. We take for granted the supply of our fresh water from Lake Michigan, and we can't do that. We need a comprehensive metering process so that 2 things happen. Number 1, we think about it as we use water. We should price it appropriately as well so that we never, ever, ever have to face the prospect of running out of fresh water. And I want to make sure that there's equity in pricing. You should not have to pay for what your neighbor uses or vice versa. The Sun-Times did a wonderful expose about the unevenness in the charges from home to home, business to business in water usage. That has to stop. And I've said that as mayor, I would make sure that there's a meter on every user.
So, Carol, there was 2 water questions, one having to do with the expanded use of meters from voluntary to mandatory. The other was what position you take and what advocacy role do you take in the water reclamation district discharge fight.
Well, to begin with, the issue of the water metering not only relates to homes and buildings and condominiums in the city. We're selling a lot of water to the suburbs, and I think there needs to be some fairness in the way that that happens as well. In regards to the effluent issues, I served on the board of an international water infrastructure company, and I can tell you that the technology exists for us to do a better job, for our Metropolitan Sanitary District to do a better job in keeping our water, that's particularly water that goes into the river, from being as polluted with effluents as it is today. I'm particularly concerned about the issue of the pharmaceutical effluents, pollutions that's going into the river. This is a health challenge, and I think that all of us and all of the agencies have a primary responsibility to protect the public health. And dumping, when you know known carcinogenics into the river is not consistent with protecting the public health. And so I really think that we should begin to move in the direction and move the sanitary district in the direction of taking advantage of the newer technologies, the green technologies that will allow us to have cleaner water.
And did you want to say any more about the meters, or you took care of that at the top?
I thought I did that already.
Okay, Miguel, then the 2 parts, make the meter program mandatory and expand it, and then the discharge issue.
Yeah, well, on the discharge issue, the Water Reclamation District is an elected body. We all vote in elections, and yet this issue and other issues really don't get debated during those elections. Ward committeemen and aldermen throughout the county pretty much decide who gets on the Water Reclamation District, and the voters just go along because they don't really pay much attention. We need to educate the general public about the function and the role of the Water Reclamation District, and then we need to see what they're hiding behind, because they say that there are federal laws that allow them to do what they're doing now or not do what they're doing now. And so if we need to change federal laws, clean water laws, then that's the action that needs to be taken in order to get them to clean up the water. Now, on water meters, there are a lot of folks out there in the neighborhoods who just don't trust the city. When you tell them that they could save money by installing a meter, they just don't believe you. And so we're going to have to educate the general public about this, and I think that, yes, we want to make it mandatory, but at the same time, We need people's cooperation. And we need to phase this in because it is costly. It's going to cost us to install these meters. There's a lot of manpower involved here. And so it sounds good to go to 50% in 1 year, but we're gonna need to stagger this, and it has to be done. And then we have to deal with those open fire hydrants during the summer in many neighborhoods that just waste and waste and waste water and don't get turned off by the water department in a timely manner. There has to be a quicker response because we're wasting good water. And then the last thing is, you know, we're selling the water to the suburbs. I agree with Senator Braun. We're selling water to the suburbs, and a lot of these suburbs are charging a lot more to their users than what they're paying us. And given our budget situation, we need to look at what we're charging them. And if they're going to charge a lot more, then maybe they should charge a little less to the customer and pay us a little more.
We've touched on jobs intermittently, so let's hit it head on here with the question about renewable energy and green jobs.
Oh, you did already? Okay, can I tell a little quick joke about this last one?
Oh, sure.
Years ago, there was a campaign for the Metropolitan Sanitary District, and one candidate's slogan was, "When you flush, think of us." I thought you'd enjoy that. A little humor here.
I thought that was good. Okay, so on green jobs, the people sitting up here have tell us very clearly that despite our advantageous location and transportation system and education system, we are a laggard in the Midwest when it comes to the creation of green jobs. And so the question for all three of you, beginning with Carol, is what do you do to expand the availability and the development of green jobs in Chicago as mayor?
Oh, listen, this is an exciting topic because we're going to have to grow our way out of this recession. At the end of the day, we're going to have to find ways to promote development and promote new economic activity, and I believe green jobs hold the key to that. And there we can talk about collaborations between the banks, the private sector, the public and philanthropic organizations to work together in partnerships for green development in the neighborhoods. And that there's a whole range of activities that come under that heading, everything from green housing development to green community development in terms of the neighborhoods, in terms of I mentioned earlier, the urban gardens. There's any number of activities that come under the heading of green development that I believe with some focus and some support from city government, we can help the private sector and philanthropic organizations bring to bear the critical mass that we need to have this green development take off in Chicago. And I know there are a lot of people who are working in this area now, but the city getting behind it 100% and giving it the access to capital and the like will make it happen.
Miguel, green jobs.
Well, you know, the Manufacturing Renaissance project and a number of other projects several years ago talked about making the Chicago area, and Chicago in particular, the wind power center in terms of manufacturing and producing the different parts for turbines. And it just didn't take off. It didn't happen. And I think it didn't take off because there wasn't support from the city. Now there's more talk about green jobs. There's talk about urban agriculture and hydroponics and solar panels and all kinds of things. And of course, it is good. It is good that we're talking more about it now. But we need a comprehensive plan for the Chicago area because it isn't going only to happen in Chicago. There are the surrounding suburbs that need to be involved to make us the green jobs capital of Illinois.
Gery?
Andy, a few weeks back, I was out at the Calumet Area Industrial Commission, and I made a statement that manufacturing can be a central part of the Chicago economy again. For some reason or another, we all bought into the idea that manufacturing was dead in Chicago and the Midwest. That's not true. That's just not true. And the green economy is the way to bring us back. For example, wind energy. We're home to 18 of the largest wind energy companies in the world. They're down here downtown with sophisticated trading operations. They make nothing here. We can have people that manufacture windmill parks. There was a person that wanted to have 350 jobs southeast side of Chicago to do plastic injection molding to make windmill parts. Got no help from the city. The city has got to step up and help on these things. Biofuels, solar. I was involved with the construction of a solar farm in Pullman, 40 acres of polluted land brought back to use with solar panels providing megawatts of energy. This can be done. There's all kinds of industries that can be spawned with planning and an aggressiveness to make this a key part of Chicago's future economy.
Okay, this is going really well. We have time for two more questions, one on the list and one that I might add at the end. And the one that's on the list has to do with walking and bike riding space. As a jogger and a bike rider, I can tell you the city has a spotty record, some wonderful areas and some dead zones. And I guess my question, beginning with Miguel, is what, if anything, do you do to expand the recreational access to more comfortable and safe and healthy walking and riding areas?
Well, we need to continue to make Chicago a pedestrian-friendly city. We need more bike paths. It's one of the reasons why I decided to support the lawsuit against the meter deal. Because if you look at that 75-year deal, it really ties the city's hands in terms of creating more bike paths and more bus lanes. And it's an awful situation. And we have to somehow renegotiate that so that we can be able to have the authority that the city should have to determine where we're going to put more bike lanes. You know, I come down Grand, and I see all the bicycles on Milwaukee when it crosses Grand. We need bicycle lanes on Grand. We need bicycle lanes in a number of streets in the city, but we're going to have to make major changes. We're going to have to pull some of those meter boxes out there so that we don't have all the car congestion. And to tie our hands for 75 years and not allow us to make the kinds of changes that are going to reduce traffic downtown and make it safer for pedestrians and for bike traffic is something that we're going to have to deal with now.
And let me ask you a yes/no question that's similar, and that is access to the lakefront. Do you support the building of what's called the connecting Upper Wacker and Upper
Yes.
Harbor? Yes. Okay, that's good. And Gery, do you support that so that there's more than one access to the lakefront for east side?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't see how you don't do it. I mean, the growth in that area of the city is so tremendous that if you don't build a network of roadways, you'll gridlock that area, and that won't serve anybody.
Okay, well, answer the other question then. What do you do to make Chicago even more bike and pedestrian friendly?
Well, fortunately, I had some experience in doing this at the Park District. We really, I thought, did a pretty good job of building a lot of bike trails, walking paths, and a really innovative project was the reuse of the abandoned rail line along Bloomingdale Avenue. I'm glad I love that project. Nearly 3 miles of uninterrupted elevated railway turned into a unique park that would have both riding, walking, skateboarding, and just sitting and taking it easy. We have to finish that project, and I'm going to commit that if I'm privileged to be mayor of this city, that project will be finished in short order so that we can demonstrate our imagination in using what was previously dead land to make it usable for people in neighborhoods. A 3-mile uninterrupted linear park would be a fascinating project for Chicago. They've done it in New York. We ought to do it here.
Carol, you're the last one on. So the simple one first, the connection to the east lakefront, so Randolph isn't the only way to get there?
Well, you know the old line, everything's been said, but not everybody's said it. I agree with my colleagues here.
Okay, and then how do you make Chicago more bike and pedestrian friendly?
I agree with them.
You mean? Oh, okay. Well, that actually gives us a couple more minutes for.
That's what I thought.
Listen, I would be betraying my 40 years as a journalist, and I would be betraying my deep admiration for all three of these individuals if I didn't ask them one financial question about the city. I've really enjoyed hearing their visions for a beautiful, vibrant Chicago that has a lot more wonderful things than we currently have. But I'm looking at a city that may be facing a $1 billion budget deficit next year. So I guess what I have to ask all three of you in order, in about a minute or a few seconds more if you need it, beginning with Gery, is how do you give us this vibrant, wonderful Chicago with all these new things at a time when you may be facing a $1 billion shortage next year, and you talking about 2,000 police officers, we can't even afford to put as many on the street as we have now.
That's because your budget's broken. And what happens is, it's similar to 1995 in the Chicago public schools. There, we were $1.3 billion in the hole. And after 6 years, we had created the largest school construction program in the country, added 2 hours to the school day, created the largest summer school program in the country, and brought about labor peace, and our test scores rose for 6 years. With experience, vision, and imagination, and a lot of hard work, this is doable. Now, here's the unique part. Right now, we're looking at deficits at the city of about $650 million in calendar year 11. We're looking at a potential deficit at the public schools of nearly $900 million. These are both gargantuan problems. We need somebody with experience who's going to figure out how to reduce the size of these governments, find additional revenue from unconventional ways. We're not taxing people anymore. Consolidate agencies. We're going to have to look at ways to gain revenues from certain charges that we haven't been using before. And I said earlier, bring 14,000 parcels are in the hands of the city government today. 14,000 parcels pay no taxes. We need to bring those parcels onto the tax rolls. I would work hard through my jobs development plan to bring companies into this city, employ people, and start paying taxes on these pieces of land that pay nothing right now. The reason you're paying so much is we're not paying anything, and we need to even that out. This budget is fixable, and when we do fix it, we're not just doing it to make par. We're doing it to have optimism in both places. We want to hire those police officers. We want a world-class education system. This is doable. I've done this before. I'm confident I can achieve it again.
Carol, the same question. How do we achieve this Chicago of our dreams when we live right now in what many consider the Chicago of our nightmares?
Well, you know, again, and I don't mean to make light of the deficit issue because it's an important one, but having served on the Senate Finance Committee, you know, the old line, the joke there was add a few more zeros and we talk about some real money. The fact of the matter is that we can close the budget gap, and I am I think the only candidate, I'm not sure, who's committed to not raising taxes. Let's start with that. The middle class has been taxed enough, in my opinion, in this city, and the taxes we should not do that anymore. We need to be more thrifty and prudent with the way that we use the assets that we have and the way that we use fund city activities and essential services. So, what would you do specifically? Well, there's several things that we can do. To begin with, I agree with Miguel del Valle. We need to challenge and support the court challenge on the parking meter deal. A 75-year lease, $1 billion that now is being hawked on Wall Street as being worth $11 billion. Somewhere in the course of a year, somebody decided to make $10 billion off of the failure of our city council to get the proper advice on this deal. So that's one thing. That would be a possibility. If we just go to something like what's called enterprise contact management, the way that we use data in the city, we can save $500 million just doing that. We can also we put a moratorium on the TIFs. That will give us additional revenue stream. We've identified over $1 billion of savings just by doing things more sensibly. And this may rub some people the wrong way, but ending the tax exemption, the exemption for not-for-profits for water and sewer services. I mean, it's a subsidy we just can't afford anymore, and we're happy to help those not-for-profits find other ways to get the money. But again, that alone will save us another, a huge chunk of money. So you put it together, you parcel together things like, you know, condo rebate program. There's all these little things that don't make a whole lot of sense, that if we approach the budgetary process more rationally, we will be able to put together the money to close the budget gap and to prepare us to go forward to protect essential services.
So I guess if you're mayor, we'll stop drinking water in our office and stop flushing the toilet.
No, you won't. You'll be able to raise the money. You've been doing it.
All right. Miguel, take your shot at how you get how you get a beautiful, flourishing, vibrant city and still deal with this mess that we have in terms of our budget.
We have to buy some time here, which means that next year, the first fiscal year of the next mayor will be a very, very tough year where tough decisions will have to be made by the mayor and the city council. The city council approves the budgets. Don't forget, they have to vote. And they're going to have to assume responsibility for the tough decisions that have to be made regarding cuts and regarding revenue. Folks, the corporate budget is about $3.8 billion. We have, according to some, $1 billion hole, maybe 700 million. Let's do the math right here. How do you cut that much out of the budget? Well, you have to cut some. And I like to say that I want to start cutting the deputies that report to the deputies who report to deputies. I mean, that some people say, well, that's more symbolic than anything else. But it is important, because when we start talking about where fees are going to change and where adjustments are going to be made, and whether or not we're going to start charging institutions for water that used to get free water, or for police protection, or charging for festivals where police officers have to come in and provide security for private activities. These are tough decisions that will have to be made, and I'm ready to make those decisions. I think it's important that we understand that there will be pain, a significant amount of pain. As a matter of fact, I have said this a number of times, and I'll say it again here. I think the next mayor may well be a one-term mayor, because the tough decisions will have to be made, and there will be a lot of unhappy people. There will be people in labor who will be unhappy. There will be residents who will be unhappy. But we have to get through this difficult time, because we have lost over $1 billion in revenue that we used to have when the recession started in 2007 that just disappeared. It's going to come back. I'm confident that the economy is going to improve. A lot of indicators are showing us that that's going to happen. But things like proposals like the one I proposed, the financial transaction tax, which Wall Street doesn't like and our folks in the mercantile exchange don't like, the fact of the matter is that they're doing very, very well. The bankers are doing very, very well. We have to ask them to assume more responsibility for the well-being of our city. And in the process, we do have to protect the middle class and the lower income class. It doesn't mean that we're going to hit all the rich folks up for everything. But we need to get past these next couple of years that are difficult years, because I'm confident that our city is going to be strong by the end of the next mayor's term. But so many unpopular decisions will have been made to get us there that it may be a one-term mayor.
Okay, we're about to do the closings up. Pardon me for being naive, but I have to tell you, sort of tongue-in-cheek, Miguel, that when you start going after the deputies who report to the deputies who report to the deputies, you might have a few aldermen and ward committeemen who won't support your budget. That's just my suspicion.
And those fights are necessary.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I think those are fights everyone welcomes. Okay, believe it or not, we actually got through every question on our list in one form or another. We're going to take 3 minutes per candidate to give you a closing statement, kind of give you the final pitch in their sales job tonight. And I think we should all commend them with a round of applause first for dealing with good questions. So let's listen to the closing statements. We'll do that in reverse order. Gery, Miguel, Carol, you have up to 3 minutes, and take it away.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you all for your participation in all the groups again. It's been wonderful to be here this evening. I think we're all after the same thing. We're all after a truly tremendous Chicago. We want that world-class city, and we can have it. But we're not going to get there simply by wishful thinking. We have to have concrete plans. I put forward a plan for improving our education system tremendously. I put forward a plan for bringing jobs to our city. These are all on my website, GeryChico.com. because I don't believe in pablum and I don't believe in pandering to you just for your vote. I want to tell you the way I really think, because I think that's what the next mayor is going to be called upon to do, lead. I think that we can achieve the status that we want as a great city. And let me tell you one of the indicators of that. I want a city where the young people who live here today want to stay here and raise their families and feel proud of this city. It's a very, very important indicator of the vibrance of a city. I want to make sure that business is comfortable in our city, because that's our future. Companies that are here employ people. People that are employed are contributing citizens and really reflect well on our city. But as I said, it's not going to happen by just wishful thinking. We have to lay out plans. And I've tried to do that throughout this entire campaign. I love our city. I'm from our neighborhoods. I still live right down here, and I call this a neighborhood. And this is what it's about. I have to tell you, this is the highlight of my life, to run for mayor of Chicago and even hold myself out to work with you to take us to the heights I know we can achieve. You know, people that came before us gave us this great city. And it's really incumbent upon us right now to do everything we possibly can to make sure that not only our generation, but my wife and I have a 2-year-old grandson, that his generation inherits a city that we can be proud of. I would really appreciate your support to be your next mayor. Thank you very much.
Okay, the final thoughts of Miguel del Valle tonight.
First of all, it's been an honor to be here tonight and to spend time with the downtown neighborhood, a downtown neighborhood that must be connected to the neighborhoods on the south, the neighborhoods on the north, and the neighborhoods on the west. And that's my goal as mayor, is to bring this city together. We have racial segregation still in the city of Chicago. It's not as much as it used to be. We've come such a long way. You know, in a recent article, the Sun-Times shared with the world my experience growing up in the neighborhoods in Westtown and going to school and being in fear and sitting in my 7th and 8th grade class afraid to go out the front door. Why? Not because I was a bad individual or I was a troublemaker, but because of my ethnicity. My sons and my daughter have not experienced that in the city of Chicago. They don't know what that's like. We've come a long way, and yet we still have areas of the city that look like the areas that are described when people talk about food deserts. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. This election is about, of course, the future, but it's also about our potential to continue to grow, our potential to continue to evolve as a wonderful city. And sure, I mean, it's like perfection. You don't reach it, but what makes us better is reaching for it. And we know that we can improve our neighborhood schools. Today we have a 2-track system in the city of Chicago in our efforts to make more academic options available for everyone, which are very, very necessary. We now have a system of public education, which is not a system. It's a 2-track parallel system with magnet schools, selective enrollment schools, and charter schools on one track, and neighborhoods schools on the other track, and the neighborhoods being drained. And we need to strengthen our neighborhood schools and make them the anchors of their communities. And we need to provide options for all our parents so that parents don't have to struggle with the decision when their 3-year-old is ready for preschool as to where they're going to send their kids to school because the school down the block is not good enough for their children. That needs focus, it needs attention, it needs a vision that includes everyone in every neighborhood in the city of Chicago. That is what I offer this city, because I am deeply rooted in the neighborhoods, and I know that with my skills and my experience of dealing with $50 billion budgets for 20 years, we can deal with the finances of the city, but it will take some tough decisions, and it will take a long time to deal with. We're not going to do it in 1 year. It'll take a few years, but we're ready to do that. We're ready to work, and I ask for your support.
And last but certainly never least, Carol Moseley-Braun.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and giving us this opportunity to speak with you about our respective vision and for the city. This election really is about the direction that the city will take, whether or not how we define ourselves as community. The question, I think, is one of reform. Whether or not we're going to continue to have a closed circle of people making decisions about what happens to the rest of us with focus on one part of the city while the rest of it gets neglected, or whether or not we will define ourselves as a community in which every neighborhood counts, every community counts, and that people collaborate and work together to solve problems. I believe that it's important that we have a city council that actually functions as a legislative body, that we have openness in government, that our budgets are online where people can see them, that we have ethics and disclosure laws, that people can have some confidence in the transparency of city government, that decisions are made along the way that engage and involve communities and the people who live in them. That's why this forum is so exciting, because there's so many people came out tonight because it shows that you care about your community and you care about the decisions that affect it. I am running for mayor of Chicago because I love the city. This is my home. And I grew up here at a time when children could walk to school in the neighborhood in which they lived and get a quality world-class education. I want to see that happen again in Chicago. I want to make certain that we have the public safety so that seniors are not held hostages in their homes and businesses feel comfortable opening up in the neighborhoods. Because at the end of the day, getting our economy going will require job creation, and that is where the private sector is most invaluable. The public sector doesn't create jobs, the private sector does, but the public sector has an important, critical role to play in creating an environment for private sector job creation. I want to see jobs created in the neighborhoods where people live so that those communities can be revived, so that our city can thrive. Because as the neighborhoods are developed, as the neighborhoods come to life again, the city will thrive and be able to be the most livable city in the world. Chicago has so much going for it. We have so many assets here. The universities, the laboratories, our downtown is a special place, unlike any place in the whole world. We want to build on that and use that to leverage our neighborhoods and to support our neighborhood development so that everybody in Chicago can feel comfortable that this is the best place in the world to choose to live. And so I ask for your support as well. I have the experience to do the job. I have the ability to do the job, and I look forward to working with you to help put some of this vision, some of these dreams in action. Thank you very much.
So just to say goodnight with a couple of words, these are difficult times, but they're vibrant times. There's something extraordinarily exciting about the first open election for mayor in the city of Chicago in 21 years. I had the privilege of covering Mayor Daley all of those years, and I share the feelings of my former story mates up here that the city has come a long way. It still has a lot of problems, but covering Byrne and Bolandic and the first Daley and Harold Washington and Eugene Sawyer and now Rich Daley, I think there's something wonderful about an open election, which we haven't had for more than 20 years. So let me first say thanks to SOAR, Brian and Irma and all the groups that came together with a great agenda and great questions. I think we learned a lot tonight about some very important issues that aren't always on the front burner of these debates because they may not be the sexiest, but they're bread and butter issues about the quality of life. And so it was my privilege and pleasure to be able to paraphrase the questions that were provided by people who know a lot more than me. Let me thank three people I admire greatly for taking this plunge, running this race, and coming out and doing this night after night and day after day. It's not easy to prepare for 2 hours of questions in front of a live audience, and these guys continue to do it day after day. And finally, let me just say thanks to all of you. Some of you were viewers of Channel 7. You're all citizens of Chicago. And I just think it's thrilling that you're participating in the first truly, truly democratic exercise in the city in a very long time. And I think it's a wonderful time. Pay attention. On tables out there, there's information on all the candidates. They all have vibrant websites where you can get a fleshed out version of all their answers. And finally, if you think it's important to have someone holding their feet to the fire as a watchdog, check out our website, bettergov.org. And if you believe that better government is feasible and that maybe I'm a good spokesman for it, consider becoming a member or supporter, because I can't do it alone. Thanks very much.